Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparutade sangamatassa tawara ye sodavanta bamunchantu satang. So this is opportunity, the 40th year celebration of Amaravati, and the actual day that we came to Amaravati was the 2nd of August in 1984. So that was 40 years ago, and I was 50 years old then, just turned 50. 40 years have passed and it's like this. In 1984, it was a kind of ominous year, and as a university student, I had read Orwell's book, 1984, which seemed distant time, and then suddenly the year actually appears as a fact. And it's the year that many of us moved from Chithurst Chittaviveka to Amaravati. And at that time, the M25 wasn't completed, so there were a lot of complaints about how difficult it was to come from North London or towns north of London to cross through Heathrow or Hindhead on the way down to Amaravati. So before that, I decided we needed to establish another monastery that would accommodate more monks and nuns, because by 1984 the Chithurst was crowded. And we'd already made agreements with the local council that we'd only have so many residents at one time. And the nuns, the Siladharas, were crowded into a little cottage, the local cottage. And so there wasn't enough proper space for them. And in 1984, there was a lot of rumors going around about a Third World War, and Britain was being armed to the teeth. In Greenham Common people were protesting at Greenham Common because of the cruise missiles coming to England. Rumors about a Third World War, with Britain being the kind of battlefield for that war. There was a lot of negative feelings amongst young English people about their future. What was their future going to be if there was a Third World War? And there were a lot of peace movements, and it was all a rather fearsome time, frightening time. And so when it came to giving this property a name, I chose Amaravati to bring the concept into the minds of people here of the deathless reality that we all share. Because people were all concerned with death, or violent death, or nuclear death. And so death is a very negative, unpleasant subject for most people, where the concept of deathlessness was not available. or it wasn't in the conscious minds of people in Britain or Europe or America or anywhere else. So when I chanted the gate to the deathless is open, aparuta de sangamatasa tawara, amatasa twara is a gate or the entrance to the deathless. And so over the years, these past 40 years, I've tried to emphasize deathlessness. As you notice, many of my talks about the deathless reality that we share, because the differences between the different forms is given so much attention, so much importance, that what is truly important, truly liberating is Amaravati, or the deathless realm. And then we wonder, what is it? Is it like immortality, like the gods on Mount Olympus, or so because it's the language we have is based on life and death. And we identify, culturally and egotistically identify with death itself when we're attached to the body. The bodies that we identify with are all growing old and will get sick and die. And yet this attachment leads to a lot of fear. One of the subjects in polite conversation is not to talk about death. Life is important, enjoy life, be happy, succeed. And so that's the general message of modern societies is life is wonderful and we should enjoy it. So life itself is in many ways wonderful. It has its magic and beauty and pleasures that we experience through the senses, through the forms, the bodies that we regard as ourselves. But then as we grow older, that sense of youthful joy, pleasure, singing, dancing, drinking, be merry and happy and have a good time, that no longer is particularly attractive. Because old age itself is an experience that generally the senses weaken, the body starts having problems, and the ability to live a life of eternal happiness and joy and pleasure diminishes. So I've found in old age, through the practice of meditation, a sense of peacefulness that is much better than dancing, singing, drinking, having parties, and seeking happiness. And it's the deathless realm that I've realized, the Amaravati, through awareness, through mindfulness, through investigation. So this is, I give this particular monastery great importance in the fact that it bears this name, Amaravati, deathless realm. And then the teaching is always pointing to that realm. Like the monks here, the nuns point to the deathless when they give talk. They practice in order to realize for themselves the deathless realm. because we have the concept, we have a name, Amaravati, but it comes and goes and changes. But the deathless realm is apparent here and now and timeless. It's not something that really has a name. So here and now is always here and now, whatever state you happen to be physically in, emotionally experiencing, or whatever place you are, who you're with. So Santitiko Dhamma, Akalika Dhamma, Dhamma is our refuge. Dhamma is deathless. It has no beginning or end. It has no name. You refer to it as the Dhamma, you take refuge in the Dhamma. But in itself, it's just a convenient moniker and used in ceremonies, and because this is how we experience life, is through concepts. Notice how we want to name everything. If it doesn't have a name, we feel bewildered, we want to give it a name. Just walking around Amaravati in the springtime, you want to know, what's the name of this flower? What's the name of this tree? And because somehow they have more reality if we've given a name, whether it's Latin name or English name. So we're caught in the momentum of conditioning with our languages, with our education. We want to understand everything intellectually, explain it. What is the deathless realm? What is it? To give a definition, define it, describe it. But the reality is you can't do it. It has no name. There's nothing to describe. And the best you can do is silence. The sound of silence. Now, people ask me about the sound of silence because many people notice this. It's kind of like a cosmic vibration, or you want to call it something. The sound of the divine, or it can be just a buzz, or is it a sound, And in my early meditations, I was very interested initially, before becoming a monk, in Zen Buddhism. And Zen Buddhism was, always, I remember reading a book called The Diamond Sutta Cutter of the Doubts. And being a thinker, I love to read. I'm well educated. I like to know things and figure everything out. As a person, wanted to be reasonable, sensible, rational, logical. But then in the Diamond Cutter of the Doubts, a sutta in the Mahayana scriptures, it's about doubt as a way to realize Dhamma. So in this Zen kind of literature that I'd been reading, there was talking about koans, which are conundrums, which the meditation master gives to his students, and they're absolute nonsense. They're not reasonable, rational, sensible. You can't really, when you try to figure them out intellectually, you can't do it. And if you do find some clever way to describe an answer to the koan, the Zen master hits you with a bamboo stick until you realize there's no answer. But what doubt does, koans do, is they create doubt. Because we want to know, what's the answer? I want to impress the Zen master. I've been meditating day and night, desperately trying to practice to answer this question, this koan. And every time I see the master, he hits me with a stick. And I'm very high IQ, and I don't know why he does it, because some of my answers are very clever. And the more clever they happen to be, the more he beats me with a stick. So obviously that's not the answer to the koan. But what you do when you ask yourself a question, like one koan was, what was my original face before I was born? You know, you can try to, it's in a question form, it creates doubt. I don't know, I never thought of it before. I didn't know anything before I was born. And not to mention my original face. Because this face, you know, when you're caught in identifying with the body, is what you identify with, this face that you have right now. And is there an original one? Is it possible that we all have had original faces, personal original faces, before we were born, and they can wonder, what does that mean? It must be something deep and profound that the master is pointing to. How can I realize my original face? Maybe I'm not spiritually developed enough. I don't have maybe enough samadhi or concentration, or maybe I just not meant for enlightenment. I've committed too many sins in life, and we can start criticizing ourselves or losing faith in the Zen master, feel he's just a sadistic brute, or ways of trying to explain the situation. So this attempt to find an answer to a conundrum, you know, we've all done it, I'm sure. Then, you know, we expect to do it rationally, intellectually. But what the master is pointing at is beyond that, beyond the intellect, beyond reason and logic, or cultural conditioning or education. So what is the original face? Don't know, is the answer. Because nobody knows as a person, as a personality, as a man or a woman, what their original face was before they were born. So that's a fact, we don't know. But we can still see that personally, like I have to practice harder to realize that even after years of practice, you'll never know the answer to that koan with your intellect. Because you're not meant to. The answer is, I don't know. Because not knowing is doubting. When you doubt something, you don't know what to do. When you doubt yourself, you don't know who you are. Have you attained stream entry? And then, you know, you think of it personally. I've been a monk for so many years, I'm highest stream enterer. And then I can, you know, with words, concepts, and dedication to the holy life, and celibacy, and keeping Vinaya, and I must be a stream enterer by now. But it's my personality that wants to enter the stream. And the personality is a condition that you've acquired. It's not your original face. And the personality is very changeable. It moves from happiness to depression to, when the sun's out, you feel happy. When it's cold and wet, you feel depressed. And you get a good meal and you feel happy, and you don't get a good meal and you feel angry. So your personality will change according to the conditions. So the first fetter that one has to recognize for stream entry is the sakyaditi, or the ego, the identification that we've been attached to as the body, the physical body, the thoughts, the memories, the emotions, how I feel, what I think, how I look, whether I'm male or female, whether I'm young or old, black or white. These are all personal traits, and old, young, male, female can never realize the path. Man or woman cannot realize, if they identify with the gender of the body, that identification cannot realize stream entry. Sotapanna. So are you really what you think or believe? And this is the question. This investigation is a very important part of meditation practice. The Buddhist teachings are an encouragement, an invitation to investigate life, find out for yourself. So in terms of sati, Dhammavicaya is to mindfulness and investigation. And this first noble truth in the Buddha's first sermon is the beginning of that. We're given something so obvious. So there's something that we all experience as human beings is suffering. And so this is investigating suffering, not analyzing why I suffer, who's to blame for it. Suffering is like this, and you feel discontented, you feel misunderstood, you feel jealous, anger, resentment, greed, desires of various kinds. And then these, when we don't get what we want, we suffer. When we get what we want, we feel happy, but it doesn't last. And so the first noble truth is to understand it. To understand something, you have to go to the source of it, which is inwardly, opanayika jamma, where you turn inward. You're not looking outward to blame somebody that we tend to do, even if you've been abused or misunderstood. That's not the point. The point is that suffering is like this feeling of discontentment or resentment or boredom or doubt, worry, anxiety. Cold hopes swarm like worms within our living clay, putting it poetically. And humanity, with all its benefits, like here in the UK, while the rest of the world there's so much confusion and chaos, we have a fairly peaceful life, at least here in the monastery. And yet, how many monks and nuns are really content? After meditating for many years. Because they still see monasticism in a personal way. Monks or nuns can't get enlightened as long as they're identified with the forms that they've adopted. So it was quite a wonderful realization to me to realize that I, Ajahn Sumedho, can never be enlightened, can never realize the path as a person. As long as I am attached to my views and opinions, my sense of a separate self, my position as a senior monk, as long as I'm attached to these titles or perceptions, they're never going to be enlightened. Can senior bhikkhus become enlightened as long as they're attached to their status? As long as one is attached to, I'm senior to you, that's sakyaditi, that's the ego. Because you see yourself as separate from others. So this separation is what the senses do. Like right now, I'm sitting here, you're sitting there. You're objects to my sight. My eyes are the subject that can visualize and see you as objects. So in terms of worldly dhammas, the worldly view of life, it's about subjects and objects. And that's a delusion, that's illusion, that's the sense of separateness, identification, seeing objects as making judgments that they're good objects or bad objects. That's all conditioning. We create a whole problem around life and political systems and family experiences and everything we do, as long as our basic identity is with the body as separate. Then we talk about equality, and it's an ideal. We want equality. But that's another word. Can different conditions be equal? The thing about sankharas is they're all different. So we all look differently. Some are tall, short, male, female, fat, thin. And we're all supposed to believe we're equal. In what way? Just as an ideal, it's a beautiful ideal. It's not to disparage it. But where is equality at this very moment? Where is it? Is it just impossible? Are we totally separate at this moment? You and I, I'm separate from you? Or where are we unified? Is in consciousness. Consciousness is the equalizer. Because when we begin to realize the silence of consciousness, it has no language. It's not about right and wrong, male or female. It's like this, it's peace, it's love, it's unitive. It doesn't discriminate, doesn't pass judgments on anything or anybody. So this is a profound realization that the Buddha was pointing to through his encouragement to investigate suffering as a noble truth rather than an unfair fact of life. I remember years ago, before I was a Buddhist, I was brought up as a Christian, and I used to wonder why God created suffering. You fall down and hurt yourself, and you think, if I were God, I would create a world with no pain, no suffering. Even as a small child, if I were God, I'd create everything and make people live in peace and happiness. We'd have permanent happiness, and everybody'd get along, and everything would be wonderful, and we'd have permanent sunshine, ice cream every day. And I'd be happy forevermore. But God, who I was told by my mother, loved everybody equally, and I didn't quite understand what that was. Because there's so much discrimination, unfairness in life, injustice. And you have to live with a body that's very vulnerable. So you're stuck for a lifetime in a human form that is very fragile and vulnerable, and you're supposed to take it personally. And an old body, when I'm 90 now, so I don't expect to live much longer, but people ask me how I feel about being 90. And I'm quite happy being 90. But I don't really want to be 90 forever, or even live to 100. Because you feel degeneration of the physical form, the fragile human form that I used to identify with. It's not going to get it better as I grow, as I move towards 100. It's just going to become more difficult to walk, and my vision is failing, and I don't imagine, unless they perform medical miracles, could they make my life on a physical level any more pleasant. Or that I could conquer old age, sickness, and death through modern medicine, through modern scientific experiments. But then I asked myself, am I 90 years old? And then you realize through wisdom that the body is 90 years old. It got there, it's nothing to do with me. It's the aging process of a human body, a male body growing old to 90 through 90 years is like this. Then who am I if I'm not the body? Because that's how I was conditioned to think. I am a body. I am a man, I'm a boy, I'm a male, I'm a white man, I'm an old white man. And that's a derogatory term these days. And so, you think, am I any of the, in terms of convention, it all, we understand it. I'm old and white and a man. But these words are used very personally. We can take them personally. People send me birthday cards by 90 years young. But 90 years is not young. and the body's not young, and I have no desire to to believe it's young or even young looking. It's this way. What never ages is consciousness. The silence doesn't grow old, get sick, and die. It's the Amaravati, the deathless, that one can realize for oneself. And so the 40th anniversary of this conventional place called Amaravati is meant, my purpose in establishing it really was to give better living conditions to the monks and nuns. But at first it was pretty rough going, as many of us remember. It came in 1984 to these wooden buildings, a very cold winter. I remember Ajahn Sumedho, the head monk of Santa Gittarama in Italy, he was here, and he spent his time underneath the buildings trying to repair the plumbing, which was bursting. I like to tease him, for a whole winter I just saw the legs of Ajahn Sumedho. And I just assumed it was him, since I couldn't see the rest of him. So the body suffers when it gets cold, there's not proper heating. And then you can see that in very personal ways. I don't want to be here. I didn't ask for this. I want to go back to Thailand, nice warm country. And the mind goes on, the personality will rattle on about what I prefer, what I think, or what should happen here, how are we going to develop Amaravati. And for the benefit of the Sangha, there were 22 of those wooden buildings, and they were in not good repair. But I remember that first year here, I don't really remember. I remember feeling, cold, but I had insight still. I remember walking Jongrom outside where the office is, and had this lamp that gave off a really disgusting yellow light. It's kind of like something sick. And there was snow and ice on the ground, and I was walking back and forth doing the walking practice under this sickly yellow light on an icy surface, and I thought to myself, it couldn't get worse than this. But I suddenly felt very happy, because mentally I was okay. The body was cold, it was not beautiful to look at, didn't know what was going to happen, how this monastery would develop, had no kind of great plans for the future. What to do with all these buildings, and how to populate them, how to use them, and these became long discussions for committee meetings and so forth. So this was the way it is in terms of the conditions. So the conditions change. And I've been back, I retired in 2010, went back to Thailand, stayed in a very nice place, Wat Pa Ratanawan, which has better weather than Wat Pa Pong. It's a higher elevation, very pretty area, scenic-wise. And it's almost always eternal spring. But after 10 years, I became homesick for Amaravati. So, and Ajahn Amaravati had made it very clear I was welcome back, so I built this Roga Kuti that I now inhabit. But I was quite happy in Thailand. But I lived so many years here in England. Most of my life I've spent in England, more than the United States or Thailand. And this is where I strongly feel at home. And so I'm very happy to be back. And at the deathless realm, Amaravati. But I promised Ajahn Kevali of Wat Pananachat, or Wat Pananachat in Thailand was the first monastery I began and established, or whatever you want to call it. And since I've been given very high titles by the King of Thailand, I have to have a royal funeral. So I'll die here at Amaravati, and we've just spruced up the chapel of rest, and this Buddha Rupa, marble Buddha Rupa that was given to me in Thailand. It's a copy, it's supposed to be a copy of the one in Kusinara in India. And I remember at age 80, when I was 80 years old, I became obsessed with reclining Buddhas. So I went to Kusinara. I really liked that beautiful reclining Buddha that resides there. I memorized the Nibbana Sutta, chanted the Nibbana Sutta around the reclining Buddha in Kusinara. And then everybody started giving me reclining Buddhas. I haven't brought them all to Amaravati. But this one in the Chapel of Rest was donated by Sian Ma, a supporter, a Malaysian supporter. And it's beautifully carved. They make exquisite stone carvings in Thailand, in northern Thailand. And it's white Italian marble, and it's contrasted with Merchi Renu's glass reclining Buddha. And so when I went in there the other day with Ajahn Asoko, Ajahn Arya, who built the stand for the Buddha Rupa, and Ajahn Yanasanti, and it felt so peaceful. I said, I'm looking forward to be laid in this beautiful chapel of rest. But then to be cremated, I have to go back to Thailand. So, and I promised Ajahn Kevali they could have the cremation at Wat Pananachat. So I told Ajahn Kevali, once I'm dead, I don't really care what you do with it. But the conventions are such, like this. In Thailand, which is, a really wonderful country to live in. And they offered me this opportunity to ordain and be a monk. I've been honored in the highest ways by the lay communities, the Sangha in Thailand, by even the king. So this is a sense of gratitude for these honors. Then here in England, people say, establishing these monasteries, and they say, they give me a lot of praise for that. But this is custom, this is convention. Because as awakened to Dhamma, I'm nobody. I'm not a high-titled monk. I'm not a head monk. I'm not a senior monk. I'm not a male. I'm not even a human being. This is what you realize. This is ultimate freedom. I'm not what everybody told me I am, or what I used to believe I am. This is not the result of just taking on Buddhist robes and Buddhist customs and Thai traditions, but it's insight into a teaching that is so necessary at this time and so available on the internet now through media. There's so much available now on these wise teachings, ancient wise teachings from India, that were never heard of before. Buddhism is now, is easily available on the internet, in Theravada, in English forms. So this is a time where, with all the crises of the world, seeming and the doomsday scenarios that you hear on the news programs, the media, you realize there's nothing to worry about. There's no fear. Your true nature is peace, consciousness without end, consciousness that has no beginning and end, which you are at this very moment, but you may still identify with what you're not. So I encourage all of you to really investigate life. Don't be afraid to question, am I really Ajahn Sumedho? Am I really this 90-year-old body? And you can see that this is all given to me by other people. You're not born with identifying with anything. You're conscious, like a newborn baby is fully conscious, pure consciousness, with a form, male or female form. And then he's told, you're a boy, you're a girl, you're English, you're American, you're Thai. These are acquired names that we identify with. I didn't come into life and tell my mother I'm Robert Jackman. She told me I was Robert Jackman. And now I'm Bhikkhu Sumedho. That's how impermanent names are. But I see what I can do now, the remainder of my years, is to keep reminding you all of your true nature. Not trying to convert everybody to Buddhism. That's not our intention. It's not a matter of changing Christians into Buddhists or making them believe in anything, but encouraging them, any religion or whoever or whatever identification they prefer, that they're not that. They are the pure, deathless Amaravati, here and now, timeless. So I offer this as a reflection.
Annamayang Dhammakatha Sadhukarang Dadhamase Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu Anumodhami.